Hey guys, Dan here with this week's movie reviews. I think we've finally pretty much reached the end of the theatrically released movies that are finally getting put on demand or on DVD. A bunch of them, of course, went on pretty early after their theatrical release when theaters shut down, but there's still a few from earlier in the year. And then, I don't know, starting next week, I guess maybe we'll do some of the Netflix movies that have been talked about lately, Extraction and Spencer Confidential and some of those. But for now, we've got for you the rhythm section, the photograph, Impractical Jokers, the movie, and as I've been doing the last few weeks, our fourth movie. I've sort of just been venturing out and trying to find something sort of under the radar that maybe I wouldn't have known about otherwise if we weren't in the shutdown, and I was looking for extra things. And this week, that comes to us by way of True History of the Ned Kelly Gang. So we'll get to all of those. Let's kick it off first with the rhythm section. This is now available to rent or buy online. It's $4.99 to rent, $14.99 to buy. And by the way, when I give these numbers, these are from Amazon, but your results may vary if you're going on Vudu, or some of the different sites have different price points, but as a general sort of average, maybe we'll go with the Amazon prices. This did get put on DVD just a few days ago as well, so you can get it on DVD and Blu-ray if you'd like to do that. This is a movie starring Blake Lively, and it's a revenge story. Basically, sort of like, it's a little bit, I don't know, they're trying to do like a James Bond type thing, I think, here. But essentially, her family dies in a plane crash a few years earlier, and she's a London prostitute, and she's approached at one point at her place of business, let's say, by a journalist who tells her, hey, listen, the plane crash wasn't an accident. It was an attack by the government that's been covered up. So she ends up eventually believing him, and then the rest of the movie is a journey to seek out her revenge, to seek answers. She goes through this extensive training course, and we have Jude Law in the film as well as sort of her trainer, and then Sterling K. Brown shows up as well. Look, I like Blake Lively a lot. I mean, I've liked a lot of her movies. I didn't watch Gossip Girl, I think is the show that she was originally on, but I didn't watch that. But I mean, just from The Shallows and from The Age of Adeline, both really good movies, surprisingly. I mean, from the concept of both of them, I was like, I don't know about this. But then they both turned out to be like in the B-type range for my grade. And then, of course, just her relationship and marriage to Ryan Reynolds. They're so fun together on Twitter. She just is a very likable person, and I think she's a good actress as well that maybe doesn't get her due. A Simple Favor actually is really good too. That's one with her and Anna Kendrick. And here she is really trying something. Look, the movie is a mess. Blake Lively's solid acting, which is not on full display here, but she's trying. It's just not enough. This movie is narratively a train wreck. The editing is all over the place, and Sterling K. Brown, who I love on This Is Us, and I've seen him recently in some other work as well. He's a very compelling actor. He's okay here. Nobody's really doing a great job. Jude Law's sort of just hanging out. I think the people in the movie are about as confused as the audience in terms of like what their characters are supposed to be doing, how they're supposed to be acting. Blake Lively's accent, God bless her, is horrible. And it just cohesively as a unit didn't work. And I actually was like rooting for this movie because I like Blake Lively. And when it bombed at the box office, and then we got it at my theater, a couple weeks later as a second run. So it has been a couple months since I've seen this movie. I saw it in mid-February probably, or late February. But I really, like, even halfway through this movie, I was like, okay, this movie's not great, but I'm going to stick with it. Like, I'm kind of on board. I like a good revenge story, but none of this movie comes together, like, at all. I really think they were sort of going for this James Bond type of thing, with the way that like certain scenes are handled and shot, and her motivation, for revenge, and not that that's always James Bond's motivation, but it just seemed to be an imposter that just none of it was working. I liked the original sort of concept and everything, and her finding out, like, I feel like her sort of learning about the backstory of the plane crash is more interesting than any of the action scenes, and in an action movie that's not really what you want. So yeah, so it was not a good movie. I can't recommend it. I'm not exactly sure what these people were doing in it. Jude Law really just seemed to sort of be stumbling through his performance, and I like him too. I like everybody, that's a star of this movie, and this just wasn't the vehicle for them. So I leave the rhythm section with a D+. So moving on, we've got The Photograph. This came out on Valentine's weekend. It is a romantic drama. And it stars Issa Rae from Insecure and from the movie Little and some other things. She plays Mae Morton, and then Lakeith Stanfield is Michael Block, and he's been in a bunch of stuff lately. His star is certainly on the rise. He was in, he had some small roles in some movies like Selma and Straight Outta Compton, but I think I would say his main starring role to this point has been probably he was in Get Out. That was pretty good too. But I would say Sorry to Bother You is probably like his main. But he had a prominent role in Uncut Gems. He was one of the detectives in Knives Out. So he's really on the rise, and he's a great actor. This movie is an interesting one. Speaking of Sterling K. Brown and This Is Us, this movie sort of takes a This Is Us approach to these two characters. We don't necessarily see them in the various aspects of their life, but the movie is sort of split in two because it's partially about these two characters, and then it's partially about Mae's mother back, about 25 years ago or something like that. And so they basically meet to interview and stuff, because he's a reporter. But we go through their romance as well as the romance from the past. And I mean, not This Is Us certainly is not the first thing to do something narratively, going back and forth with flashbacks. But it's sort of like The Notebook and movies like that. Although The Notebook is mostly told in flashback, I suppose. But basically, she finds out some things about her mother, who was a photographer, through some pictures that she finds in this safe deposit box, and so she ends up trying to explore more of her mother's life as she's also courting Lakeith Stanfield's character. So this movie was actually a little bit of a surprise. I didn't know how I was going to feel about it. It looked to be kind of boring, to be completely honest. It looked like it was going to be a pretty dry romance movie. And especially, I'm always weary of ones that open on Valentine's weekend, because it's like a lot of them are sort of in that Nicholas Sparks sort of realm, which I typically don't care for. Some have been good, but for the most part, they're a little too melodrama, a little too sappy. But here, I actually was engaged in both of the stories. I was into the young story with the Issa Rae and Lakeith Stanfield, and then the older people story from the past with her mom and everything. Although I guess in the past she's kind of the same age as Issa Rae and Lakeith Stanfield are now. So I guess they're sort of going along the same age group. But the old story versus the current story, I guess you could say. And there's a couple of obvious twists in this movie. And I'm not sure that the comic relief works for it either, because you've got Lil Rel Howery in the movie, and he was the comic relief in Get Out, and he had his own sitcom for a little bit. And it's like, I only really see him as a funny guy. And here he's being pretty funny as well. He's doing, like, some bits. And then, Lakeith Stanfield's boss at work is, Chelsea Peretti from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So it's like, and she's only in a couple of scenes, but still it's like, she's bringing the funny too. And I don't know, I feel like with movies like this, it doesn't need to be, straight drama all the time, super depressing. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. It can be true to life. It can be, realistic. It can, and life is funny. Sometimes that's fine. But I just don't think the casting maybe was right for some of the supporting cast. Even Issa Rae to a point, because I'm so used to Issa Rae being funny in her other work. But, Insecure definitely has some very serious moments too, so I get that. And also, Lakeith Stanfield, just in general, I think, is a chilled kind of guy. And so if you're going to have comic relief with somebody, I feel like it could have been a better mix than to have Lil Rel, because Lil Rel is always like bubbly and up and like rapid fire jokes, and Lakeith is like super chill. I think in pretty much everything I've seen him in, he's pretty chill. So to be honest, I think the supporting cast maybe is a little bit of a detriment to this movie. But I was invested in the characters, and I think that the two leads do have great chemistry together. And I was even pretty interested in the flashback stuff, the old story, especially when we meet the man from that story later on, as he's older in the present day. So, it's definitely a little generic. It's got some usual twists, you could say. But overall, I actually thought this was a pretty good movie. I give The Photograph a B. So up next, we've got Impractical Jokers, the movie. Now, full disclosure, I've only seen, I think, one full episode of Impractical Jokers, the show, and then I've seen, a bunch of different, I don't know what challenges, I guess you would call them, on different things, YouTube and whatever. And then I know sort of them as like a comedic entity because they were judges on this game show that was on TBS. Or maybe it still is, I don't know. But, these guys and the show, I get it. It's fine. Some of it's pretty funny. I think some of it's kind of stupid. But I like Impractical Jokers more than, say, Jackass or... I'm trying to think of some of these other shows that are, like, sort of gag-oriented in different sketches. I mean, like, Punk'd, I don't know. I think I probably even like this better than Punk'd. Like, Impractical Jokers, I think, can be funny. Because the reason I like Impractical Jokers above some of these other things is that the joke's always on them. Like, they are the butt of the jokes. They are creating the jokes. Punk'd is like, obviously, you're going after a celebrity. And I guess, Jackass, they're the butt of the jokes, too. So it is sort of in that vein, but I don't really go for the gross out humor as much as I do sort of, mental games, I guess, like these guys like to play. But the premise of the movie takes the guys, and we start with a flashback to a Paula Abdul concert in 1994, where they pose as security guards, they get backstage, and, make a mess of everything. So Paula Abdul's like, okay, you guys gotta go, like, I'll never forget you, whatever. So then they run into her in the present day, 30 years later, or 25 years later, at a restaurant, and she recognizes them from the Impractical Jokers show, not from the concert incident. So she goes over, oh my god, I love your show, da-da-da-da-da, I'll give you guys some tickets to my party, whatever, my birthday party. So, but she only gives them 3 tickets. So then, the rest of the movie is a journey to Miami to go to this party, whatever, concert, and they have to, kick one person out, basically, because there's 4 of them and they only have 3 tickets. So then they just do challenges throughout the whole movie to determine who's getting that, those 3 tickets. So, I kind of figured I wouldn't like this movie too much if it was too rooted in the show, and it really is. I mean, there's a slight narrative here, but really not much of one. Number one, they screwed up on the year. Paula Abdul, and listen, this is maybe a nitpick, but it wouldn't have been hard to look up a concert history of somebody. It took me about 5 seconds on Wikipedia, because I didn't think Paula Abdul toured in the mid-90s, and she didn't. She toured 91 and 92, and then she toured again in 97. Why didn't they just say it took place in 92? So they could do the Forrest Gump joke they had? Like, okay, cool. Like, to me, that's just laziness, so that irritated me right off the bat. And obviously we're not supposed to take this seriously. We're not supposed to take this as fact that this is what really happened. But that stuff kind of irks me when you have a flashback to a certain year and, they're playing music that didn't exist at the time, or, this person wouldn't have been here or whatever. It's a nitpick, yes, but I mean, in a movie like this, how hard would it have been to just say it was 1992 instead of 94? So that's number one. Number two, there's no real narrative. It's the show. I mean, and not only is it the show, but they even have the graphics. They put up, the different challenge names. They put up the thumbs up or the thumbs down, the same way they do on the show. And I mean, I laughed. I have to admit, some of the gags were pretty good. They had like a broken down car on the side of the road that they had to get help from, and so obviously the people were feeding the guys different sort of inappropriate lines or whatever to say, or stupid things. They went on a job interview for a basketball team. It was the show. Like, if I wanted to spend an hour and a half with Impractical Jokers, I would just watch 3 episodes of the show, or probably 4 without commercials. I would just watch 4 episodes of the show and be satisfied. There's no need to even create a narrative. That being said, yes, I laughed. Yes, Paula Abdul was fine. I mean, she can act a little bit. But like, it just wasn't necessary. Like, and I've never seen the Jackass movies, so it's probably about the same thing. They can probably get away with a little more on the movies than they can on MTV, so it's probably a little more, R-rated for that. But like, I don't even think this movie's rated R. I think it's basically just the show, but set to a very, very, very threadbare narrative. So yes, I laughed, but this isn't really a movie. That's just all. So I leave this with a C. If you can find the segments themselves somewhere on YouTube, do that. Or if you want to rent it. Oh, by the way, I should say this too. I've been saying for all the other ones. You can rent this for $5.99 or buy it for $9.99. And then the photograph you can buy for $19.99, and it will be on DVD and Blu-ray on May 12th, so in a couple of weeks. But yeah, Impractical Jokers, I would say, don't really waste your time. I mean, if you're a hardcore fan, I don't think these are bits that they've done before. Like, I don't think they're recycling bits. So if you're a hardcore fan, you might enjoy it more than I did. I mean, I've only seen probably 10 or 12 of their bits anyway. So I wouldn't necessarily call myself a huge fan. But I don't see the point in making a movie, I guess, is if you're not going to have a real story to it, all right, so finally we have True History of the Kelly Gang. This is sort of my off-the-beaten-path pick for the week, and this was $6.99 to rent. It just went up a few days ago on all the on-demand platforms, so this is really, pretty new movie here. It's based on the book of the same name from 2000, which was a pretty popular novel by Peter Carey. We've done the Ned Kelly story a bunch of times. I don't think I've ever seen any of them, but the very first feature-length film back in 1906 was about Ned Kelly. There was one in the 70s with Mick Jagger playing Ned Kelly. There was one with Heath Ledger. I think it was in 2003. Simply called Ned Kelly. So the story of this guy has been told a bunch. He is a famous Australian rogue, outlaw, whatever you want to call it. And so he lived, or was, most notorious, I guess, in the 1870s, and that's where this story takes place. And it stars some familiar faces. Russell Crowe is in it for a bit. Nicholas Hoult is in it for a bit. And the star, Ned Kelly, is George McKay, whose name you might not necessarily know, but he is one of the two leads in 1917, an excellent, excellent war picture. So how does this movie stack up? Well, I wasn't sure how this would go, because most of the ones I've sought out so far have had pretty high Rotten Tomatoes ratings, and also pretty high audience ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. This one has kind of a high rating for critics. It's in the 70s, but then the audience range is more in the 50s as far as percentages. And I certainly would agree more with the audience. This movie is, first of all, it's way too long. It's 2 hours and 5 minutes. They easily could have trimmed off 10 to 15 minutes or more, and I think that would have made for a tidier picture. But it's just all over the place. Who's it directed by? They're trying new things with the direction. Justin Kurzel is the director. Do we know him from anything else? Not really. Oh, he did the Assassin's Creed movie. Well, all right. I didn't really like the Assassin's Creed movie very much, but I don't play the game either, so I didn't really expect to. But yeah, I think he's trying a bunch of different things here to convey some different messages, and it results in like this really messy execution of the movie. Some scenes are very like light intensive. There's almost like a strobe effect in some of the scenes that didn't really work for me. The violence seems very over the top. Was it realistic for the time period? Probably. But it just seemed a little bit gratuitous. And with that in mind, I think the language was a little gratuitous. It was like at the one portion towards the end of the movie, it was literally like every second or third word was an F-bomb. And I was like, okay, I get it. Like, you like to curse, and it's, you're Ned Kelly, whatever. I don't even think it was him cursing the whole time. But, and everybody does a fairly good job with the acting. I mean, Nicholas Hoult, I'll watch him in pretty much anything. He's been in some not great movies, but I love him, going back to About a Boy, one of my favorites. Russell Crowe's not in it that much, but he does a good job. And George McKay is good as well. He's quickly becoming one of my favorite up-and-comers. But, just nothing about this sort of was cohesive, There's a lot of gratuitous things, not just the violence, not just the swearing, but there's a lot of, like, gay themes here that to me seemed a bit gratuitous as well, even as a gay person. So, and the other thing is, and this is direct from the book, so I can't necessarily blame the movie, I don't think, for this, but, it's called True Story of the Kelly Gang, as opposed to, like, hey, we've seen these other Ned Kelly things, but they were bunk, this is real. From what I understand, this is the furthest fetched one. Like, it's almost like a tongue-in-cheek title of, oh, this is the true story of what really happened, but then it's not at all. It's super, over the top, and not everything that's on the screen even remotely happened. And that was just sort of annoying to me. I don't know. So, yeah, overall, this was kind of just a mess. I mean, maybe if they had trimmed it up a bit, I think 15 minutes, 20 minutes would have done the picture a little more justice. It does not need to be anywhere near 2 hours. And I think just kind of toned everything down. I mean, it seemed to be like gratuitous stuff, the movie, after a while. And it just got boring. And just the execution is just so very messy. Both literally with the violence and figuratively with just the way it's presented. So this was not high on my list. I leave True Story, is that what it's called? True History of the Ned Kelly Gang. I leave it with a D+. not good. Easily the worst one of the ones I have sort of sought out. Most of those have been at least some sort of positive grade, if not very positive, like Clemency was. But so that'll do it. I try not to keep these movie reviews longer than a half hour, and I have succeeded there. So short and sweet today. Next week, like I said, we're gonna, I think, dive into some of the recent Netflix movies because I think we've all kind of dried up on the theatrical movies for the time being, and with no sort of future in sight for the theater industry for the next month or two, I think we'll be doing that for a little while. But that's okay, because Netflix and the other streamers are constantly releasing movies, so there's still plenty of stuff to watch. And, you know, some stuff is going to go to on-demand. For example, I know Warner Brothers is putting the Scooby-Doo movie out that was supposed to be one of their big summer tentpoles that was going to come out in May. I think actually in 2 weeks it would have come out. They're going to put that up just like Universal did for Trolls World Tour. The day it was going to be in theaters, they'll put it on demand. So I'll definitely have a review of that when that comes up. By the way, it was called to my attention earlier today, this would have been the opening weekend for Black Widow if we weren't all in coronavirus quarantine. So it's hard to think about that things could be radically different out there right now. And we could all be watching Black Widow, but guess not for another, I don't know, 6 months or something. I think that was pushed to November. It's hard to keep track of all the dates that are shifting. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Comment below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And that's it. We'll be back tomorrow with another review video. And thanks for watching. Be safe.